evening, friends. My name is Barbara North, and I am delighted to introduce you to this gentleman. This is Charles Hatfield. This Charles Hatfield was born in 1875 in Kansas, and he and his family moved to Southern California in the 1880s, so this is a Western Hatfield story, not a Southern Hatfield story, just in case you were wondering. Sorry if I'm disappointing anyone with that, but we're talking about the American West here. And what Charles Hatfield is doing in this photo, aside from looking really swank, he was a dapper fellow, he is mixing his special magical 23 chemical compounds into these big cast iron boxes, and he's going to take these cast iron boxes. He mastered that formula in 1902. He will take those cast iron boxes, he will put them in the top of one of these towers. This one happens to be a 20-footer, but he went up to about 60 feet in different circumstances. So he's gonna take those cast iron boxes full of his secret concoction of 23 chemicals. Maybe science. We'll get there. Maybe science. But he's going to put them at the top of the tower, and he's just going to let them, like, effuse out into the environment. Just, you know, enter nature to make it rain. Maybe witchcraft. We'll get there, too. So you might think that you know, Charles is coming at this from a perspective of chemical background, meteorology, you know, related science to the idea of making it rain. He was a self-tutored student of meteorology. He did study meteorology quite a bit, but his background was actually in sewing machine sales. He was really good at it, though, so as long as he met his quotas, his boss didn't mind him spending time on this other stuff. And he became deeply involved in the study of meteorology, and he spent a lot of time working on his chemical compound and making notes about what his perception was of his ability to influence the weather around him. And this is not new for humans. Humans throughout time have tried to influence the weather, summon the weather, ask gods and other deities for help with the weather, or impact the weather in some way. So one of these examples is, here we're looking at the Dodola ceremony, which was practiced in Slavic countries as a way to try and summon rain. One of the many faces of the god Jupiter is Jupiter Pluvis, who was the rain-giving version of Jupiter, and lent his name later to the science or pseudoscience of rain-making, pluviculture. But this is something that we've always tried to do. We've always tried to have influence and agency over the weather. And even now, cloud seeding is something that we use across the globe in different circumstances to make rain, to make snow, to try and influence weather. Cloud seeding typically involves either shooting something into the atmosphere with a certain amount of force or seeding it directly into the clouds from an airplane. Silver nitrate can be used for this, ice can be used for this, there are a couple of other compounds. And shooting stuff into the atmosphere with a certain amount of force is a way that we've tried to control the weather for a number of years. For example, these cloud seeding guns were used in Australia in 1903. And in the history of US rainmaking, there were certain callbacks to perceived rain that would follow Civil War battles. So, you know, a battle would occur on the fields during the Civil War, and then, you know, thunderstorms would roll in the afternoon, and people were trying to figure out if that was related to the particulate that was going up into the atmosphere because of the new military technology that was in use. And in the United States, during the late 1800s and early 1900s, we had a lot of different degrees of kind of like scammy science to like legitimate science going on in the field of rainmaking. So everything from the sort of well-renowned meteorologists of the time who were exploring these things and looking at these things, putting together presentations for the World Fair, all the way down to straight up, if you give me $100, I can make it rain on your farm, and it doesn't really work out, but I have your $100 and I'm on the horse out of town kind of situation. But by far and away, the most famous rainmaker in the United States in the early 1900s was Charles Hatfield. And Charles Hatfield had a lot of nicknames. He was very popular in the press. He was the first lieutenant of Jupiter Pluvis. He was the drought destroyer. He was the rainmaker. He was the cloud compeller. And that last one was actually his favorite name for himself, because one of the things that Hatfield always said about his science that he was engaged in, the work that he was doing, was that he said we cannot force nature to do anything, but we can assist nature to do everything. Nature will respond willingly and freely to artificial assistance. Do we not fertilize and cultivate our ground to obtain better results? Yes. Then why not induce or assist nature to produce rainfall? So Hatfield was not claiming that he could make rain from nothing. And that's not what he was measuring when he was doing his experiments to try and establish what his 23 blend of chemical cocktails should look like. He was trying to help the rain that was already coming. He was trying to collect the moisture that was already in the atmosphere and increase rainfall volumes and make what might already be there better, using this sort of value add to nature. And it seemed like he did okay at this. Starting in 1902, when he got his chemical compound down, he had reasonable success in Los Angeles. So, he went there, and rain also went there. He had some limited success in the Yukon territories. He went there, and some rain went there, but he at least received payment for services rendered. He had significant success in La Crescenta, California, which is just outside Los Angeles, where he set up just outside this building his big tower with his effusing pans. I do want to note that was in 1904, so it was not related to the flood of La Crescenta, California in 1934. He was not not even in town when that happened. But Hatfield had enough success that he'd given up the sewing machine sales job and was traveling mostly around the Western United States, helping people with their weather problems. And he came on the radar of the City Council of San Diego. San Diego had grown a lot in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They were, gone from about 40,000 people to about 200,000 people, and their water system was definitely not coping really well with that in 1915 when they decided to reach out to Charles Hatfield. The Moreno Reservoir in San Diego was really low, and they were really worried, and it was coming into December, and it didn't look like it was going to be a very rainy year, and so the City Council had invited Hatfield in to come and talk to them about what it was he thought he could do for them. So Hatfield comes into the City Council, and he does a presentation about his cloud coaxing and the way that he can help to make things wet or wetter. And the City Council voted 4-1 that he should go ahead and do this. At the time that he did this presentation, Hatfield gave the City Council of San Diego a couple of different options on what the pricing on this might look like, but he was in a real hurry after they voted yes because he knew a low pressure system was moving into the area and he wanted to try and take advantage of that. So he left without a signed contract. This is the foreshadowing. We'll come back to this in a little bit. So December 28th, he runs out of the building. 4-1 vote, go ahead and do this. He and his brother Paul go shopping. He buys his whatever goes into his chemical compound, mixes up his chemicals, builds his towers. This one was actually the tower outside of the Moreno Reservoir. January 1st, 1916, they're all set up, they're ready to go. The neighbors are not impressed. Apparently, the gases smell so bad, it rains in self-defense. Charles Hatfield did take his chemical compound with him to the grave. We do not know what his 23 chemicals were. What we do know is that they were stinky. What we also know is that on January 5th, it started to rain. And it rained. And it rained, and it rained, and it rained. It rained like 30 inches in January in the San Diego area that year. It was really wet. There were a number of problems with this. Entire communes of farmers were getting wiped out of existence. All of the telegraph lines went down. The trains weren't running. The entire United States was awash with rumors about what had happened in San Diego because no news was coming out. San Diego is washed into the sea. The city of San Diego is an island. That was kind of technically true at this point. But it was a lot more water than people were counting on. And unfortunately, on January 27th, 1916, the Lower Otay Dam went out. So of the 3 dams surrounding the Morena Reservoir, 2 of them were significantly damaged during this rainfall, and 1 of them washed out entirely. And when that dam washed out, somewhere between 15 and 60 people were killed. And that's a big spread because people were being displaced, people were moving, people were like, California is not for me, and bailing out entirely. So it was hard to get an accurate count, but there was an unfortunate loss of life attached to this incident. Towards the end of January, it did actually stop raining, but the reservoir was full. So great for Hatfield, right? Like, all right, the reservoir's full, that was deal. I came in, I did my stuff, your reservoir got full. Where's my money? Like, weren't we talking about maybe $10,000? $10,000, City of San Diego. Yeah, unfortunately for Hatfield, that lack of contract is coming back to play here. The one councillor that had voted against this and the mayor of San Diego had a couple of questions for Hatfield. If he didn't make all of the rain, he was just assisting nature, how much was he actually responsible for? How much of the rain could be attributed to him versus how much could be attributed to God? And if he was responsible for all of the rain, was he also responsible for the $3.5 million worth of damage that had been accumulated in the city of San Diego? Because he'd like to talk about that. Hatfield's stance on this, while Hatfield was responsible for the volume of rain that filled the reservoir, God was responsible for the floods. And he took the matter to court. It was spent 22 years in court. During that time, Hatfield went on to do other rainmaking. He was hired to fill the Big Bear Lake, which you will see here again was low in 2021. He was hired to fight forest fires in Honduras. This is a modern use of cloud seeding. In some places, people will try and manage around forest fires using cloud seeding when there's already moisture in the atmosphere to greater and lesser degrees of success. But in 1938, the San Diego Superior Court declared it a dead issue, and Hatfield did not get paid. Which is kind of a bummer for him, because the question is, like, what was he actually doing? You know, we talked a little bit about cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is actually a thing, and I am not a scientist, but I gotta say, like, I'm a little skeptical that, like, the effusion technique that Hatfield was employing was really effective given how modern cloud seeding works. But he put a lot of work into trying to sort of measure this and validate this. He'd studied a lot of meteorology, so there's this real open question as to whether or not Hatfield was just running a scam. He'd show up, it would rain, he would be like, look what I did for you, and get paid for it. If he was really good at predicting where that rain was going to be, or if he really was engaged in some of that nascent cloud seeding. So I'd like us to close out here with a toast to Charles Hatfield. Charles Hatfield was a rainmaking in the sense of the modern use of the term, bringing in a lot of business, rainmaker in the original sense of the term of the guy that made rain. He was a rainmaker who did not get paid by the city of San Diego, but may or may not have contributed to the filling of their reservoir, and a little bit extra.